I'm Anthony Elmore, President and Founder of the proud Black Buddhist World Association. And today we bring you another exciting Black Buddhist Lecture. My lecture today is called Buddhist Shit Stinks. Now, I did not just come up with the topic Buddhist Shit Stinks. This actually came from one of the Gosho teachings by the 13th century Black Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin. Now, many people, white people, Asian people, and Black people do not believe that Buddhist shit stinks. In this lecture, we're going to teach you that Buddhists got some funky shit. Let's get into our lecture. Now, in 1980, I read the book Malcolm X on Afro-American History. This is when I was first informed that the Buddha was black. Now, in my research and study about the Black Buddhists, I would write about this and I would communicate this idea. I was so excited that I wanted to tell my Japanese Buddhist teachers that the Buddha was black. I was excited, I was innocent. And of course, white people would say, what difference does it make whether the Buddha was black or white? And this gets us into the topic of our subject, Buddhist Shit Stinks. Now, it wasn't Anthony Elmore who wrote about shit, but the 13th century Black Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin wrote about shit in one of his Goshos. Now, the Gosho is called The Roots of Good Fortune. Now, this is what Nichiren Shonin writes about it. He says, suppose one dries dung, that shit you know, and breaks it up and pass it through a sieve and forms it to resemble a block of sandalwood. Even if one were to then carve this into the image of a woman, a heavenly goddess, or a Buddha, when it is burned, it would still give off no other fragrance but the stink of dung. Similarly, if one kills or robs others or takes from them the first fruits of the harvest, then even if one should offer one's gains with the intent of acquiring merit and good fortune, that offering would instead become an evil deed. Unquote. You see, the Japanese and the Asians teach us Buddhism, but what they did was they robbed the inheritance, the legacy of black people. You see, let me explain what white people and Asians did in the Buddhist religion. Whites and Asians got together and they purposely erased all Black Buddhist history, language, and culture from Buddhist teachings. In essence, what whites and Asians did, whites and Asians literally shit on black people. And what they did was they carved this into a Buddha or into a God, or they make themselves so pure. At the same time, they shit on black people. You see, the point remains, if you rob a people of its history and offer me Buddhist teachings, whereas you've extricated black history, you are in essence have created an evil deed. Now, as we come further, in our entire world, ladies and gentlemen, something is wrong. In our entire world, there does not exist one single black male who is honored and respected in the black community as a Buddhist. Imagine, black people have accomplished the greatest heights possible in our work. For example, Barack Obama, the first black president, became the most powerful man on planet Earth. Even today, in 2018, Barack Obama was listed as the most admired man in America. You can go whether the Olympics or running corporations, the black guy runs NASA, the science, black people write books. There is not one known Buddhist who is known as a scholar who teaches the history of Buddhism. There is something wrong in the Buddhist religion that in all of the world you cannot find one single black male who is respected as a Buddhist. Now, in the words of the hoods, that's some shit. And the shit is there because of the shit that you find in Buddhism. You see, in the world of Buddhism, there exists a culture of funky shit. And this Buddhist shit stinks. You see, in the 2nd century AD, a white Kushan king from Afghanistan conquered the indigenous black people of India. King Kanishka created one of the world's first racist acts in that he separated Buddhism based on race, culture, and language. King Kanishka purposely changed the Buddha from black to white. We know this by his commissions that he did in the Gandhara images where he made the Buddha look like a Greek. And the way that they got together and extricated black people from the Buddhist religion, they did it via a method called Sanskrit. See, the first evidence of Sanskrit is called the Rudra Danam, which happened in the AD. See, the language of Sanskrit came from the black language of Pali, and it was a language that was used to discriminate against black people. See, Sanskrit is the language of the Brahmins, and the Brahmins used Sanskrit to rewrite all history. They extricated all black history, culture, and language from Buddhism. In fact, they created a writing called the Vedas. The Vedas are false writings, whereas they changed the history, they changed the culture, they changed the language, and they rewrote all the history. In fact, the Brahmins created a new religion. This new religion they created was called Hinduism. You see, the word Hindu does not exist in ancient Indian literature. The Hindus were the Brahmins, and what they did was they rewrote history via the Vedas, and how they got rid of the Buddha and made the Buddha, change the Buddha from black to white, is they incorporated the Buddha into what is called the Hindu pantheon. And they made the Buddha white, they rewrote all the history, they changed the dates, and they used racism. In fact, under King Kanishka, we find the first evidence of the caste system. The word caste comes from the word vana. Vana means color, and this is the first evidence of racism that happened in our world 1900 years ago. You see, King Kanishka and a Brahmin by the name of Ashwagosha created a new Buddhist religion called Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is the time in history whereas all black culture, history, and language was extricated and Buddhism became separated by race. Now, archaeology, anthropology, literary science, genetic science, and linguistic science all prove not only were there no white people in ancient India, but it was blacks who first inhabited Asia, and whites and Asians, like black people, not only out of Buddhism, they extricate blacks out of the world history. See, in other words, or in the words of the hood, ain't this some shit? See, I'm going to tell it to you straight, that is some funky shit. You see, all Asians and white people who try to teach me Buddhism, you can't tell me shit in that you extricate all of the black culture, all of the black history out of the Buddhist religion. You see, even when it comes to the black Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin, you see, ladies and gentlemen, the original people of China and Japan were black. The original Japanese were called the Jomon people. Look up Jomon. They were the Jomon people. And the original black people of Japan were black people. And in the 13th century, there was a black Buddhist sage by the name of Nichiren Shonin. Nichiren Shonin looked at all the Mahayana Buddhism in Japan and declared that it was only the Lotus Sutra that was the correct teachings of the Buddha. Now, what the Japanese did, they converted Nichiren's Buddhism to Mahayana Buddhism, and it's based on race. You see, when the Buddhist religion got to Japan, and this is over 1,400 years after the death of the Buddha, the foundation of the platform of the Buddhist religion was based on a black Buddha. And you can see it at the Toda-ji Temple. Now, the Toda-ji Temple is in UNESCO. This is a World Heritage Site. And this World Heritage Site houses the largest indoor Buddha statue in the world made of bronze and gold. This is called the Cosmic Buddha, when you see this in Japan. However, the Japanese who teach us Buddhism, they extricate all black Buddhist history from Buddhism. They don't even tell you that the messenger of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, was Nichiren Shonin, and he was black. They don't tell you that. You see, Nichiren Shonin taught that the essence of the Buddhist teachings was only the Lotus Sutra. Now, what Nichiren did, Nichiren took the Pali word that's called Namu. Namu means to awaken. And you awaken to the Lotus Sutra. Now, he first intoned the words Yo-ho Renge Kyo. Now, the word Yo means correct. The word Ho means law. Now, the word Renge means lotus, which it represents the lotus flower or the law of cause and effect. And the word Kyo means teachings. It is the essence of the Buddhist teachings. See, Kyo is all, not only the Buddhist teachings, the word Kyo is all the teachings in the universe. Now, to white people who misled me by asking the question, what difference does it make whether the Buddha was black or white? You see, true history makes a lot of difference. And we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association are committed to teaching the true history of Buddhism. You see, Buddhist history is black history. Now, the answer to the question, whether the Buddha, what difference does it make whether the Buddha was black or white? The real question is racism and white superiority. See, in order to perpetrate white superiority, white people had to rewrite history and make the Buddha white. See, humans known as white people did not become dominant in the world stage until the AD. See, ancient world history is the story of black people who left Africa called Kushites. The Kushites developed civilizations all around the world. In fact, in Japan, they were called the Anu. Now, what we call India today was known at the time of the Afro-Greek writer Homer. India was known as Eastern Ethiopia. And the Kushites along the Sarasvati River created the largest city and city planning that was 2,000 years before any people known as white people had ever had city planning. They created in a complex or a city that was, or a civilization that was twice as large as Egypt and Mesopotamia put together. Now, what happened was this. It was not only the Buddha who was black. The black Buddhists would spread their religion around the world. White people called Greeks would adopt the Buddhist religion. These black Buddhists left India and moved to Africa, and they were called Israelis. We know these Jews, and they had a name, and they were called the tribe of Judah. See, these black Buddhists were called many names. They conquered Egypt, and they were called the Hyksos or the Shepherd Kings. You can see these black Buddhists in Egypt with the snake. The snake was called a Naga, and these Buddhists were called Nagas in India, but in Africa they were called Nubians. And we know about the Nubians, and the Nubians were Buddhists because the father of history, Herodotus, wrote about the Buddhists. They were not called Buddhists, they were called Jim Sophers. Jim means naked, Sophers means philosophers, and Herodotus visited Meroe, which was the capital, and it was Herodotus who said that Meroe was the cradle of the Jim Sophers. Also, I want you to look at a Buddhist temple in Africa, in Egypt. It's called the Apodemic Temple. What you see in the Apodemic Temple, you see carved, you see the Naga snake coming out of the lotus flower, and you see the Buddha head. See, Buddha was known as the sage of the chakras, or the lion of the chakras. Now, these black Buddhists were founders of what we know today as Rome. Now, look this up. The original Romans were called Etruscans. The Etruscans and the people of India they called Dravidians were one and the same people. They were also known. By another name, and that is they were known as the Sumerians. So when you look in the Bible and you read about the Good Samaritan, the Samaritans, the Etruscans, the Gymnosophis, Buddhists had many different names, but we know that they were Buddhists. In fact, there was another group of Buddhists. They were called the Krishnas, and the Krishnas spread their Buddhist religion all over Europe, and the white people took the Buddha in his mother. They were called Madonnas. Ask any white person or any religious person why you have black Madonnas. You have black Madonnas because that is the story of the Buddha and his mother. The baby Buddha's mother was the Madonnas. And this eventually became known as the religion of Christianity. Now, we can show you all of this Buddhist history, but when it comes to the Asians, when it comes to white people, they extricate all black Buddhist history, culture, and language. And we, as the proud black Buddhists, as a part of our Buddhist practice, where the whites took it out, the Buddhists, we black Buddhists, put it back in. It was the Buddha of Buddhism that arrived in China 1,000 years after the death of Buddha. It arrived in Japan some 400 years later, about 1,400 years after the death of Buddha. Now, Asians and whites rewrote black history, or rewrote Buddhist history, by extricating all black Buddhist history. And the whites and the Asians practice this racism. And this is not only some Buddhist shit, this is some funky Buddhist shit. I am Anthony Elmore, President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association, bringing you another Black Buddhist history lesson. Thank you very much. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. All ancient icons show a simple fact. They all show that the Buddha was black. I believe in facts indicator was wrong. Buddha was no Aryan. This song saw the history by those who rewrite history. Brothers and sisters, there's something to understand. It was 1,000 years as the Buddhist dealt his teaching right in Japan. Let me tell you something that makes sense. The Buddhist teachings did not start in the Orient. Those of you make a religious decision, the Buddhist teaches no ancient religion. The Buddhist religion has a lot of mystery. Ancients took out all the Black Buddhist history. Let me lay on you the history and the facts. Look at the ancient Buddhist statues, he's always black. Let me lay this on you, all the Black Buddhist history, and take out all the Buddhist mystery. The land today they call India. In the old days, it was called Eastern Ethiopia. The first people in the land were called Dravidian. The same people today we call Nubian. India is the land where we find the birth of racism. It all started in a religion called Brahmanism. 1,000-year war took place in India called the Mahabharata. The fight was between the Aryans and those of the kingdom of Dravidia. The Aryans won the war against their Dravidian brother. They started what is called the Vedic culture. The culture was a religion called Hinduism. They created the world's first religious racism. They created a system called caste that made black people eternally last. The Vedic religion was called Brahmanism. It was distorted teachings of ancient Buddhism. Let me let you in on some facts. The icons of the ancient Buddha were all black. Let me break down to you the Buddhist mystery. Shakyamuni Buddha was the first Buddha recorded in history. Let us not get our thoughts mixed. The elder Buddha came from Egypt. He was called Hermes Trismegistus. The Buddhist teachings come from other lands. The Buddhism we learn come from Japan. The Buddhism that the Japanese teach comes in mystery. That is because the Japanese extricated the Black Buddhist history. Expand your mind and gain power. Let us go to the ancient Japanese capital called Nara. At the ancient Japanese capital in Japan called Nara, there's a temple called Totoji. This temple is where World Heritage Site B. We're not to believe what our line eyes see. When it comes to the facts, do not be alarmed. This world's largest Indo-Buddhist statue is made in bronze. This bronze statue is about 50 feet high. When it comes to the Buddha, the Japanese will not lie. The world's Indo-Buddhist statue is made of bronze and gold. We should disregard the facts that the statue is black. Do not behold. Disregard the facts and believe what you're told. The hell this Buddhist statue does not make sense. When they made it black and navy, it was an accident. They called me Sensei Akeda. I'm the SDI president. I'm like a Buddha. I'm never wrong. Disregard the Buddha statue. The Buddha was not black. He was Aryan. In my knowledge to learn about the Black Buddha, I did persist. I went to the Japanese priest and asked him to explain a picture like this. The priest says, forget your aligned eyes. No Black Buddha statue exists. I said the black hair on the old Buddha statues don't make sense. The priest says, don't believe your lying eyes. The black hair is just an accident. In the Buddha world, the Black Buddhist mystery, because the angel removes all the Black Buddhist history. Educate yourself regarding the Buddhist mystery by learning Black Buddhist history. What the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what's the line I see. Disregard what the facts may be. All ancient icons show a simple fact. They all show that the Buddha was black. I believe in facts, indicator was wrong. Buddha was no